Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of eHeroes. A lot of you guys have problems getting media. I mean, media attention or keeping that, getting your name out there. So I brought on a media expert, Susan Harrow, and thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Oh, it's so fun. I mean, I think now everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame in some way, shape, or form. There's some people who want to be quote unquote internet famous, and then some people who want more traditional media, who want to be on TV or radio, podcasts or print.
Mhm.
But I think that now, because the internet is so crowded, and certainly since COVID, it's even more difficult to stand out, and so many people want to make their mark, right? And whether you've always been on the internet or whether you're new to the internet, I think it's now really necessary to be able to carry yourself well on camera, to be able to communicate via video, because that's where people want to see you now. Now we can start to see people in person, but when we can't and we can't travel, we want to see you via video.
I first got on the internet in 1995 when I started my first business, and it wasn't as crowded as
Not
it
at
is
all.
now, and it was so much easier to get attention. But it wasn't until 2012 that I started looking at things and saying, okay, how do I make my coaching business better, bigger? And at one point, I had won a media award or a marketing award
Oh,
for a piece that
congratulations.
I had created, and
Great.
and I milked that sucker and I mean I was sending out press releases to newspapers, media, I mean magazines, everything, and now getting right up and it was like 15 minutes of fame. I just stretched it out
That's
and
so that's so fascinating because yes, your 15 minutes of fame. I mean, sometimes people's videos or whatever go viral and then that's the end of it. But I think there's a real art to then multiplying your media once you get it, like you demonstrated. It's like the more you get media, the more you get media. So that was a very smart move to start to say, here I was placed here, and to start to
Mhm.
share with everybody where you were placed, and with your clients too and your customers too. They want to know. That elevates you in their eyes as well, to have gotten media, and places you. It's a way to really elevate your status in a way that's been vetted beyond the internet, at
Yeah.
least with traditional media, because you have gone through the gauntlet of people vetting you, whether it's journalists or producers, and saying this person is someone who's to be listened to and paid attention to.
For me, it was different. I mean, I look at some of the local service businesses who, they might get a little bit of media attention and they want to be able to stretch it, but it's hard because they're in that local demographic. They might only have one newspaper that picks them up.
Right.
How do they share it? How do they get more publicity? Because, you know, so, for me to take my 15 minutes of fame and stretch it globally was one thing, but now say a local plumber, what does he do?
Well, I think it's really about the angle. It's not necessarily about the location. It's about what do you have to say that connects with people's audiences. Like, people all over the country have plumbing problems. So if you've got an innovative way to solve a plumbing problem, or you have an interesting story, or like, let's imagine that you were a plumber and you went and helped all kinds of people free during COVID because you had a special, you put on your special apparatus, you went into people's homes and you help people keep their homes, for example. That would be like a national story, because so many people are losing their homes or being booted out of their rent. So it's just about thinking in a bigger way.
Hmm.
And by getting, even if you got national publicity as a plumber, it would increase your local business because people would have seen that. And oftentimes, when I was a publicist, because I was a publicist first before I was a media trainer, what I found, I know this might sound crazy, but sometimes I had to get national publicity first for my clients before the local media would write them up. So if I
Wow.
got somebody in the New York Times, then the San Francisco Chronicle or the San Jose Mercury would go, oh, that person has been vetted by a higher source, and so they must be great, and I should probably write about them too, and they are local. So oftentimes that would happen. So sometimes, even if you're local, I suggest that you start small, because managing yourself on media is a practice. So do start small, and start with the easiest is and the slowest would be newspapers, blogs, because you're writing, right? And then the next is radio and podcast because you're speaking, but it's longer form, like you and I are doing now. And then the fastest is most difficult is TV because you just typically have 2 or 3 of 4 or 6 minutes, and you have to be able to speak in such a way really fast to get your points out. And the other thing is that we just started talking about sort of offline is that one of the things that people don't realize is that in order to make publicity work for you, you really need to have your messaging down. You really need to know what you want to say and have that connect to the audience. So you want to have your stories and statistics and facts and vignettes already set in some way to know that you're going to weave that into the conversation so you get the results that you want. And it's really thinking about, like, lots of times people would say, oh, I want publicity, but I would say, but what do you want it to do for you? Mm-hmm. How do you want to grow your business? How do you want to direct your business? Because, I remember somebody came to me and asking to be a client. She's like, I got a write up in the San Francisco Chronicle and I got 100 phone calls. And I said, but how many of those people turned into clients? And she said 1. And I said, well, that's not a good average. Mm-hmm. So whatever you were saying wasn't driving in the right kind of person to call you up, because you don't want 100 phone calls and only get 1 client, especially if you're talking about your plumber, right? You want all of those phone calls to be relevant, or all of those visits to your internet to be relevant to whatever your offer is, whatever you're selling.
And I liked how you brought up share your story, because that was the first chapter of my very first book. And I think people's story is the most powerful thing that they can do, but they have to kind of, polish it to a point where, it's not so interesting, but it's the media wants to share it.
Well, you need to have, it's not just your story. I mean, the first question that you're going to be asked is, why do you do what you do, or why did you write your book? So you need to have an answer for that. And that's when you really want to think about what your signature story is. What is the story that brought you to where you are today? And sometimes it's a story, and you can have lots of different signature stories. I have like 4 different signature stories. One might be, like, one of my stories is that, I have a course called True Shield Verbal Self-Defense for Girls. And that's so girls 12 to 24 can protect themselves and know what to say and how to act in any of the 10 most dangerous or difficult situations. So a story for that is not my same story as me as a media trainer. It's a story of me seeing a bully pinning down one of my artistic friends and beating him up, and a big crowd around them, and me going and yanking him off and saying, and everybody scattering me, saying, like, why are you watching this? Like, and being the protector of people who couldn't protect themselves, and then training people now today on how to use verbal self-defense before they have to use physical self-defense. And I'm in a black belt in Aikido. So, I believe that we want to have ourselves both physically trained, but also verbally trained, right? So I was shouting at him and then yanked him off, and then said to everybody, like, what are you looking at? Like, get away. And then became like the protector of those people who are the artists or the people who can't speak for themselves. And that also connects with what I'm doing today with people in media. It's not that people can't speak for themselves, but how do you speak for yourself in the way that is most connective to people, and that is going to also be something that's going to be advantageous for you. I mean, where that meeting point is, like, to serve your audience and to serve yourself. And by serving yourself, you're serving more people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And in fact, a lot of the publicity that I get from my books isn't in newspaper. It's not a magazine, but it's in social media. I'm not a big, a lot of my early books were focused on social media.
Yeah.
And I use that not to sell my books, but to get people to sell my books. And how I did that is every time someone bought a book, I would ask them, take a picture of the book, with
Smart.
holding it.
That's great.
I have thousands of these books, or these pictures, and every time I post a picture, hey, this is Angela with my book, and I'll have a link. and people will go buy the book. And
Yeah.
it's, you know,
That's such a great
but,
strategy. I
but
love that. I love that strategy.
they sell my book for me,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
also tell their friends about it. And I've had media companies call me and they say, "Hey, we saw that picture of Angela with the book. Can we do a story about you?" Okay. And it was funny because the one town council in Argyle, Texas, every single town council member bought one of my books. In fact, it was Lessons from the Dojo. We talk about karate. This one, even though it sounds karate-ish, martial artist, every single page is a new lesson. So it's
Mhm.
101 kick butt ways to improve your life, business, and relationships. And that book, gave people, it actually broke it down so that you'd start off with a no belt, you'd read a few chapters and become yellow belt and green belt, and you work your way up to mastery. And it wasn't as big of a seller as my new books, but it was one of the books that I was most proudest of because, you know, I think it connected to people more.
Well, I love that you have that strategy of getting other people to sell your books because that's really, having people evangelize
Yeah.
you. And now with social media, because it's such a visual medium, that's a great way. I mean, I see a lot of authors doing that now, on Instagram, and you did it when it was new,
Right.
and now it's more of a quote unquote strategy
Yeah.
that people use, to tag each other on the media. And that can be really an effective arm of one of the things that you do to publicize
Hmm.
yourself. And even if you wrote up the copy that people could post and modify it themselves, you're doing some of the work
Right.
for them. But I think that's a wonderful.
I think the problem though is social media is oversaturated, and I like social media for the connection and the engagement. But I think people are still gravitating towards magazines. They're going towards, the
Well,
news.
magazines and newspapers and print and TV still have more gravitas than social media. And
Right.
plus, things in social media, yes, they can be accessed later, but they're much more ephemeral. I mean, if you're in a hard copy magazine, like I have the only course on getting into O magazine, Oprah's
Right.
magazine. And so now she's gotten more digital,
Hmm.
but there's more place for people. Hard copy is only 4 times a year,
Yeah.
but it's still more prestigious to get into the hard copy. But I don't know yet the results yet for the digital because it's a platform that they're expanding. But what I can say is there's more opportunity for people. And then it's a quicker share.
Right.
That once you're in that, that you can easily put it in your e-zine and up on all of your social media to increase that reach, right? So there's the shareability factor. So they each have their advantages.
Yeah. How did you get started? I mean, it's not something that you just snap your finger. I'm going to do publicity.
Yeah, so I was in high tech sales at some startups, and I had been an English major focused on Shakespeare. That's a great degree. It's a very practical degree to have. And I was always in taking writing classes because I've been a writer since I was forever. And I was in a special class, a very small class with this woman who was the publicist for the North Face.
Mm.
And I just thought, wow, that's a great melding of my writing and being able to speak. I mean, since I was in sales, I could speak pretty, fluently. Um, and so I asked her if I could tail her. I
Hmm.
said, "Can I just come over and see what you do?" And so I did, and then she started just having me do everything. So it was sort of baptism like fire. She just said, "Get on the phone and book them." And I'm like, "Well, I don't even know what to say." So I said, "Can I listen to you first?" And I listened to her, and then I just got on the phone. I was used to getting on the phone because of sales, but I got on the phone and started making bookings, and I booked the Telluride, was it Telluride? And then she had another client who was Missy Park of Title IX Sports, who was only a two-person in a warehouse at that time. And I got her like in the Wall Street Journal and all of these other kind of places. And now she's one of the top retailers in the country of women's sports clothes, right? So her publicity really moved from the two people to this big, company and a top company. But part of that was like this publicity strategy. And the gal would just had me start to do everything, like start to interview clients. And then when I had my own clients, when I started my own firm, what I found was that I got all of these great publicity placements. And then what happened was nothing.
Yeah.
So I might get somebody in the New York Times, I might get somebody on Larry King Live, on Oprah, and then nothing happened. I'm like, and they were like, "Hey, Susan," I'm like, "Well, I did my job. You're hiring me to book you on these places," and they said, "But it doesn't have any effect on my business or selling my book." And then I started listening to the way that they spoke. And I said, "Well, you're not saying the kinds of things that is going to inspire people to buy or be interested in you or get connected with you." And then I started working with them as I was a publicist on how to really get your messaging down so it would have that kind of effect.
Right.
And then I saw an immediate shift. And then I loved it so much, I started making the transition to just doing that and having other people do the booking. So when people are launching a book or a business or a product or a cause, those companies, those PR companies, or those people come to me to media train them so they're happy with their PR results, because it makes them happy. Like the publicity firm looks like, "Well, I booked you." And then they go, "Well, how many books did it sell? Or how many products, or how many programs, or, my new whatever," right? And so that's the sort of missing link between the two.
Yeah, the last 4 books that I wrote is all in the Rob versus series, and they're very sarcastic books.
On what was what are they on?
They're called Rob versus. So the first book was Rob versus the scammers, and then Rob versus
Rob versus
Rob versus humanity, and then the last one, Rob versus the entitled. And they're my sarcastic adventures dealing with scammers, lousy customer service, time wasters, fraudsters,
yeah.
and I call them rejection marketing or repulsive marketing. And the funny thing is the people who like humor and sarcasm will buy the books and hire me. The people who don't like sarcasm,
Right.
they'll read the book and say, "Oh, this is horrible. I don't like it. I don't get you." Good. I don't want you as a customer.
Well, do you want to tell the story of how we came to be? Because it was sort of one of those things that was pretty funny.
Well, everybody that knows me and has read my books knows that I have a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn. And I get these pitches all day long. And you sent me one. And I
sent you a 48-second video.
Yeah, and I'm like, do I want to watch this? What's it about?
Did you watch it?
I eventually did watch it.
Hey.
I usually don't. I don't watch unsolicited videos. I don't read.
But it's not unsolicited because you're in my network.
Right.
I sent it to you, so I didn't just send it to you randomly. And this was an experiment that I was doing on LinkedIn.
And a lot of times what I do is when I connect with somebody, I send them what I call a non-pitch video. "Hey, how you doing? I love what you're doing." And I don't tell them to check my link out. I just transcribed it. It's a 15-second video with the transcription below. And I have picked up so many clients just from that non-pitch video. And people love it. But, so when I get these videos from even connections, I just put a question mark, or I put, "Why should I watch it?" Or something that kind of repels them or makes them, respond. And sometimes it works. Sometimes.
Yeah. So you wrote me kind of a snotty response.
Yeah.
You're like, because mine was about like looking for 5 experts, people who really want to be thought leaders that you might know in your network and connect you to, and you go like, did you even look at my and obviously I'm having an assistant do
Yeah.
it. And they go, "Did you even look at my profile?" Well, I must have looked at it one time because we got connected. And I'm like, "Yeah, I have looked at your profile. I think you're the perfect person." And you're like, "No, I'm not," And so we started a conversation that way. I thought it was pretty funny, actually.
And but I'll do this back and forth with people, and some of them will immediately unfriend me. But I have
Oh, uh-huh.
eight
Well,
thousand,
those
nine
aren't your
thousand.
people.
No, but I have thousands of people. I think it's up to 8 or 9,000 connections on LinkedIn, and then I maxed out on Facebook already. And it's just one way to shove them away. And if
Yeah.
and if they want to come back, if they want to have whether an argument with me, or they want to pursue it, um, then we end up having these brilliant podcasts, where then I can use that their skills to educate my listeners, and hopefully they get work out of it. But
Well, that's a time tested PR strategy too, being controversial or being a little rubbing people the wrong way if
and
you have the personality for it, which you
right,
obviously do.
and if the interject the conversation goes lengthy, it ends up in my books. And
You're gonna get
you
great
know
stories and from your
people just
books.
read the books and they're like, these are hilarious.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just
Right.
um, I used to write these brilliant books, and that would teach people the art of social media, copywriting, podcasting. Now I just share stories, and I've gotten more business from the Rob versus Sarcastic series than I have on any other stuff that I've written. And people don't know how to take me. They're like,
I'm glad you brought up stories because I think that that's something that, I mean, there's a lot being spoken about on the internet about storytelling,
"Mhm,
and I think that there's certain kind of stories that draw in your audience, and one of them is, telling the case study or success
yeah,
story about one of your clients. Like I was just talking to my mentor the other day, and I was telling her, one of my clients, I work with him and to make his book a bestseller, and then I booked a $50,000 speaking engagement for him. And she goes, "Oh my God, like I need you to tell that story on the podcast." I go, "You don't usually tell that story." Um, but she said, I mean, it's a very short story, right?
yeah,
And one of the ways that we got his book to be, where I got his book to be a New York Times bestseller is, was on a Christian radio station, which was really like he
wow,
was Christian, but it was like there was so much influence on that. So thinking about not only where your audience is, but who are the big influencers in your
mhm,
audience, like you were talking about your evangelist. Well, that person on the Christian radio station loved the book
mhm,
and told everybody to go out and buy it, and they did. And it was like, it happened just like that, right? And so those are the kinds of things you can't necessarily predict that, but I think that you can start to strategize that. And when we look at like where do you want to go and who do you want to reach, we're looking at how can you go there the fastest, like where does joy and profit meet,
mhm,
so you can have the results that you want, and that it is you and your presence.
right,
So I'm media training a woman right now, we just finished up, who's going after a $6 million in venture capital. And so her pitch deck is really good, as are her points, but it's really her leadership presence that is going to make some of the difference between whether she's going to get that money or not, because they're looking at, are you the right person to lead this company? And
mhm,
when we look at you on, when you're on video or on TV, we're looking at, like, do we like you? Do we trust you? All of those things. But it's also, um, are you the kind of person that I want to engage with? Are you the person who I want to be my coach or buy a product from? And your values and all of that needs to come out in, a couple of quick stories, and
mhm,
to be able to create that kind of engagement. And now we have to create it even quicker. But it's really your presence and the essence of you that's doing the quote unquote selling. And I mean that in a nice way, because it's us wanting to feel good, people who are making us feel good on some level, and being able to know that they're, I hate that word vulnerability, to know, I just think it's been so overdone. But it's more about, I think it's more about connecting and being relatable than it is about being vulnerable. You don't have to share your dirtiest laundry. It's not about that. It's about sharing a story and an experience in your life that is really affecting to another person. I think that would be more accurate. Can we just wipe out the word vulnerability and transparency like off the face of the earth, Bob? Can we?
You
Right?
know, one of the stories I like to
Oh,
share is, how hospitals will bill you like $50 for an aspirin. Well,
right. That happened to my dad.
I
Yes.
I have my aspirin story is a $50,000 uh, bill, and I was actually in
Fifty
San
thousand
Francisco.
dollars for an aspirin?
Yeah, so I was in San Francisco and at an event, and I had my backpack with me, and I had some aspirin in it, and someone said, "Hey, does anybody have an aspirin? I have a headache." And I said, "Sure." And I threw them the bottle, and they took, I guess, a pill or two out and threw it back to me. Later that day, we connected, we started talking, and they ended up hiring me for a $50,000 job. And if it wasn't for that aspirin, I wouldn't have gotten a job.
Because you're a good guy. I mean,
I am
beneath
a good
your
guy.
sarcasm, beneath your sarcasm, I mean, that was a nice, I think that we can connect in so many different ways, and that some of those are, you can meet people anywhere and get clients anywhere, I think, just
But
by,
I then share that story out to other people, and I tell
yeah,
them, I say, look, you know what? Sometimes you can use a situation to make yourself money. And it's not that you're trying to make money. It's that you're trying to build up that trust or that authority, and that money making comes afterwards. But you can use it in your publicity. You can use it in your marketing, and people are like, "Wow, what? You charge $50,000 for an aspirin?" And then I go into the story. I tell people, and they're like, "Huh,
yeah.
okay."
That's great because that's like an intriguing headline because I thought you were going somewhere else with it, so you surprised me. And so that's part of the surprise and delight. What can you say? Surprise and delight. I have a client right now too. She just turned 16, so she's 15, and started. She has a foundation, and I love, she has a foundation to teach girls to code and diversity in all areas, right? And she's got sort of this big vision about not just girls learning to code, but really being comfortable in the workplace and getting more opportunities in the workplace and gender equality and all of that. And she's got all these big ideas. She's like 16. And I just love that. And I love the fact that she said, I don't care about money and I don't care about fame. And do you know how unusual that is
Yeah.
in today's society? And she is going to go really far because she's got a really strong deep intention and a real willingness and the ability to really grow this foundation in a big way. I mean, just doing things like teaching, like she's teaching the girls to code, and then she's teaching the volunteers to teach the girls to code.
Mm.
And she started a uh, a wisdom club, because she loved like Socrates at school. And I thought I love these kind of stories about people who really, they're not doing it for the money and they're not doing it for the recognition. They're doing it because they really love something and because it's meaningful to them, and they want to contribute in some way, shape, or form. So it's not about like the bottom line. I mean, those are my favorite kinds of clients and people.
Yeah. When I had my first business, which was a carpet cleaning business back in the 90s, I would always look at my competition to see what they were doing. And I was like, they were lousy at cleaning carpet or even lousy at pleasing customers, but they were getting media every single day. They were in
Mm,
newspapers, they were in magazines, they were
yep,
in
yep.
radio, and so they were getting the exposure. They were getting clients calling them all the time. And I'm like, this is crazy. They're terrible at what they do, but yet because they're getting the media, people
Yeah.
believe them. And so
But that's not the kind of company that's going to last, because people do find that out and they're going to put reviews up on Yelp. So that's like short-term thinking. Like in the US, I think we have very short-term thinking versus in Europe and Japan, they're really looking at the bigger picture. So if you're not delivering the quality that you're promising, you are not going, all of that publicity eventually is going to be for naught. That's like the, video going viral. That's good, oh, I got a record contract, but you never heard of that person ever again because they sang one song that people related to, right? So it's really not about getting that 15 minutes of fame. It's really about getting a lifetime of meaningful, I think, meaningful visibility.
So
I think that's really the key.
so before they get the media or even hire you to help them with the
Yeah.
media, they really should hire you to polish their story, to go over everything. So when they
Yes.
start getting calls, they're everything's clicking on, all the cylinders.
The time to start is now, because for anybody, because you need this for any kind of, you need this to do a video on your website, to set up your website for your branding, but really specifically for media. Before you even contact the media, you want to know what you're going to say and what your key messages are, because you want to know how, you want to know the kind of results that you want in every area, because then we're going to construct those stories. Like if you want more speaking, or you want more, you want another book deal, or whatever that is, you want to be a spokesperson, you want to be a commentator on, CNBC or NB, whatever that is that you want. But the kind of end results that you want, those we're going to reverse engineer and figure out what you're going to say to inspire that kind of audience, and for your future vision. So we're really looking at, how do you want to grow personally, professionally, physically, financially, emotionally, because PR can give you all of that. It can connect you to people, it can get you in contact with partnerships and sponsorships, and as well as driving direct business. So that's what I love too. And right now I've got one of my clients who, I love these kind of thought leaders, who is looking to industrialize hemp.
Hmm.
And we're just launching his book, and he's starting to do media, because that's going to change the economic and the environmental and the whole way that we preserve our land and our people and our resources now. So it's really, as we're moving into this new era, that's going to be super important, but it's much more long-term thinking. But I love those kind of like really big ideas
Right.
where it's going to create social change on some level, that's really it's going to really move the dial in a big way, whether it's, I mean, I love to have, I always, I want to have like a mix of like chocolate clients, like somebody who's got a really fantastic snack or chocolate or something like really beautiful, with the people who are socially conscious and maybe, feeding the world, or solving sexual slavery, or solving some of the big problems, like some of the tech firms that I'm super interested in tech right now, because there's so many like innovations that can solve problems that go much faster than the government or traditional means can do. Like I think some of our brightest minds are in tech, or like startups now. So that's of super interest to me, to media train those people who've got these innovative products or services that can shift things. Education right now, I've been talking to companies in education, because like we're going to be learning in different ways, and nobody wants to sit in front of a computer 24/7.
Yeah.
Certainly not our poor kids, right? Who should be like learning outdoors, or
Right.
doing, having these great experiences.
I always tell people, if you want to be the celebrity or the authority in your niche, you have to get media. You have to get that
Yeah.
exposure. You have to learn to tell your story and get out there and do podcasts and write books and maybe a plumber's not going to write a book, but he can get on podcasts and people are going, wow, I saw you on the news, or I saw you do this. You got to get on that. And so they need to go to you, and where do they go? Do they go to a website? Do they go to Facebook? Where do they? Where can
They
they
go to
find you?
prsecrets.com, like publicrelationssecrets.com. And I have lots of free things there. You can start with the 100-word email to get the media to call you, or go to my blog, and there's lots of different free, I actually have a page of free things that you can get. So courses and PDFs and whatever it is, wherever you are in your publicity journey, I've got something for you for free.
Nice. And see, that's what makes Susan an e-hero. She's willing to put up with my sarcasm, get past the LinkedIn crap that I make people jump through. But she's willing to educate people and share her superpowers and teach you guys, the art of getting media, and that's what you need. So, please go to, prsecrets.com, and I thank you, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Adios.
Thanks a lot.